Private member statements. I call the member for Rockdale.
Madam Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of the House an issue of major concern to many of my constituents. The 17th of December 2015 will stand as a dark day for thousands of families across our state, when their investments in taxi plates were destroyed by a stroke of Minister Constance's pen following the legalisation of ride-sharing. For decades, mum and dad investors have made the decision to invest in a taxi plate with the implicit guarantee of a government-backed asset, one whose value would be supported by our New South Wales government. Most of these people weren't looking for big returns, just a stable, steady yield that would see them through retirement and maybe something to leave behind for the children or grandkids. Historically, we must also remember that many taxi plates were given to war widows, and I cannot put into words how disgraceful it is that our government would devalue a small gesture of kindness to people who gave so much to our nation. Madam Speaker, the government is offering compensation of $20,000 to each individual taxi plate owner, a paltry and entirely inadequate sum when you consider that many of them were purchased for up to $450,000 under a year ago, and now worth less than half that amount, and in the long run, potentially valueless. I find it blatantly hypocritical that the government would sneak through such drastic reform without adequately considering industry compensation, when in the past many senior members of the government were so concerned about Labor government's passenger transport amendment taxi licensing bill in 2009, which saw only very minor impacts on the price of taxi plates. While there are many good arguments I make as to why it is unconscionable for the bad Liberal government to deregulate without fair compensation, I think these arguments might be made better in the words of Minister Dominello, whose pursuit of better regulation does not seem to include fair regulation. Victor Dominello said in 2009, quote, "The government has failed to provide any evidence to back up the claim that the bill will not adversely impact on the owners of existing plates. As such, it is not offering any compensation for potential loss in the value of people's hard-earned investments." This is 2009, Madam Speaker. Minister Dominello went on to speak of the plight of a number of his constituents, including a World War II veteran and his wife. The member for Ryde seemed highly concerned about the investments of his constituents back then, but not a peep now.
Shame.
Then there are the words of then Shadow Transport Minister, now our State Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian. It would behoove the Honourable Minister, now that she actually holds the purse strings and could provide the funding to fairly compensate taxi plate owners, to listen to her own words. To listen to her own words in 2009. Some people have put their entire life savings in a taxi plate. It is their main investment in life. I've had so many constituents coming to my office over this. So let's listen to what the Treasurer had to say back then. But their world will be turned upside down if the bill is passed in its current form. We want reform. This is what the Treasurer said. We want reform, but we want to ensure the reform is fair and that people who, as recently as last month, back in 2009, purchased a plate valued at $400,000 will not see that investment diminished overnight because the state government should have worked harder in consulting with the industry. We're talking about a lot of small businesses, she said, who own either one plate or two plates, some of whom have borrowed heavily to pay for those plates and now find themselves in a position where their investment could be severely diminished if the government's plan continues without consideration of the impact on them. Madam Speaker, we are indeed talking about a lot of small businesses in the hands of working families, and I'm sure they would appreciate an equal level of support from the Treasurer now that she can offer them more than mere words. It's passion, all right, because finally, I would like to finish by reminding the House of the words of Premier Baird when he said in 2009 again, look at this backflip bonanza. Legalisation has been brought before us, but the government has not determined how it will protect those who have current plates or transition them to the new regime. I do not know how any government can run that way. This is our Premier. Madam Speaker, I don't know how any government can run that way either. Although Premier Baird seems to have changed his mind on that point, he went on to say, listen to this, 2009, the government has a moral and economic obligation to look after those who have made significant capital investments under an existing regime but have not been given any signal about change. Such a signal would be normal in a transitional arrangement, informing the market that there will be a change. But it is not acceptable that the government allows plates to be purchased in a very short time frame but changes the game plan and the rules. Madam Speaker, while I'm not opposed to industry reform, if members opposite aren't willing to live up to their previous sentiments about the nature of decent and fair government, then thousands of everyday citizens are going to be left footing the bill for their heartless decisions. I call upon the Premier to make good and properly compensate the decent people in New South Wales that have underpinned our tax industry for decades.